In this video, we will learn how to convert from pounds to kilograms, and then we'll also practice going backwards here a little bit and going from kilograms to pounds. Now, if you've learned about these units of measure before, you understand that pounds is part of the household system, which is a completely different system of measurement from the metric system, which is what kilograms is part of. A kilogram is usually used to measure a person's body weight in healthcare. And so that's often how we measure adults. Typically, the best practice is to round to the 10th place. So we will be practicing that as we do our examples. Now, when going from pounds to kilograms, the main thing you need to remember is the conversion factor. You will need to memorize this, and it's commonly used that 2.2 pounds. I will also be using this abbreviation of LBS, which stands for pounds, or you can write out the full word, but 2.2 pounds equals 1 kilogram. Now, if you watched my previous videos and you remember my illustration from before, you know that converting the way that we talk about a weight is not actually changing the weight, it's just changing how we talk about it. For example, I used a dumbbell illustration. If someone is lifting weights at the gym and this dumbbell weighs 2.2 pounds, you could describe it as weighing 2.2 pounds, or you could describe it as weighing 1 kilogram. The weight weighs the same, but we're talking about it in two different ways. We can talk about it as pounds, or we can talk about it as kilograms. So just remember as you move forward that you're not changing the weight of something when you convert it. You're actually just changing how you're talking about it. Now let's move on to our examples. Here we have 5 questions, and we'll start with going from pounds to kilograms because typically our scales, a lot of them use the household system. Some of them can automatically convert to kilograms, but not always. So if you're in the hospital, if you're in a home, for whatever reason you need to convert pounds to kilograms, you'll always need to remember that conversion factor of 1 kilogram equaling 2.2 pounds. And we'll just write it up here for reference, but you will need to memorize that. Our first question is to convert 150 pounds to kilograms. We're going to use dimensional analysis to do this. And we always start with what we basically have or we know. In this case, we know the patient weighs 150 pounds. I highly recommend you write out all those labels. Now, we need to know how to describe this patient's weight in kilograms. And so we can use the conversion factor that we already have up there that I've told you, or hopefully you've memorized. We know 2.2 pounds equals 1 kilogram. Now, just as a review of this unit factor method, because it's really important to understand this, remember the top here and the bottom here, they both need to equal each other. These can be flipped, these conversion factors, depending on how you want to use them. They're kind of reversible. And that is helpful when if you were starting with kilograms over here with your first part, then you would want to make sure that kilograms is on the bottom. But in this case, we have pounds and then we have pounds on the bottom. So these actually cancel out and then we're left with kilograms for this patient. So let's now solve this question by just getting out our calculators and doing the math. Remember, first you should multiply across the top. So you're going to get 150 times 1. That's equal to 150. You can then take 150 and divide by 2.2 pounds. So 150 divided by 2.2, that is equal to 68.1818 repeated. So we could obviously leave this number in our calculator, but it's best practice typically to record your patient's weight to the 10th place. You follow your policy where you work or your school where you're doing these calculations, but we will round to the 10th place. Now the 10th place is 1 decimal place, which is right here. All right, when you round to the 10th place, you're going to look just to the right of this line. So we're going to actually look at this 8 here. All right, and that number will determine what we actually put in this 10th place. The 10th place is just the first place after the decimal. Here we see an 8 to the right of that 10th place. And so an 8, anything above 5, we will round up. Anything below 5, we will round down. In this case, the 8 is higher, so we are actually going to get a final rounded answer of 68.2 kilograms for our final patient's weight. So if you're required to chart or calculate a final answer and then round it properly, here is an example of how you can do that. Now let's move on to our second question. Here we're starting with 80 pounds. So we have 80 pounds and we can do our same conversion. Now some of you might be thinking, why don't I just divide by 2.2? Well, that is kind of the shortcut formula method, but you can see here understanding dimensional analysis can help you if you ever forget, do I multiply or divide by 2.2? It'll kind of show you right here that you should divide by 2.2. Let's go through this quickly and check our labels. We have pounds here and pounds down here, so those cancel. Then we're going to take 80 times 1 and we're going to get our 80 and we're going to divide that then by our 2.2. So we have 36.36, and then that repeats. So if we round to the 10th place again, we're going to go look to the right. We see a 6, that's 5 or above. So we do 36.4 kilograms is our patient final weight there for the chart. All right. Moving on, we have one more example going pounds to kilograms, and then we'll two more examples of that, and then we'll go from kilograms to pounds. So let's start with the 325 pounds. We multiply by our conversion factor. We've got 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds, and then we can solve for this. 325 times 1 is 325, and then we divide that by 2. We get 140.72. So we don't have to round up on that. We just leave it at the 7. So it would be 7272, but because this 7 has a 2 to the right of it, we leave it at a 7. So we can just go back to 147.7 kilograms. And that's our final answer. All right, moving along to the next question, 120 pounds times our conversion factor of 1 kilogram and 2.2 pounds. Some students will ask me, do these conversion factors change? Well, unless we change how we measure things, no. 2.2 pounds always equals 1 kilogram. 1 kilogram always equals 2.2 pounds. So that will stay the same. The part that changes in these questions is typically your patient's weight. So this part can change because you can have a patient that weighs different things, but the conversion factors do not change. So let's move on to doing the math. We have 120 pounds times 1. That 120 then is divided by 2.2, and we are left with 54.54. Again, we don't have to move that number up because it's just a 4 after it, so it's rounded to the 10th here, 54.5. All right, now we're going to move on to our final question, only this one is moving backwards, or, the opposite direction that we've been doing. So let's start with what we're given here. We're given a 170 kilogram patient. And we want to go to pounds. Now we've been using our conversion factor up here in this format, right? Kilograms on top, pounds on the bottom. But as I've mentioned before, we have to have the kilograms cancel the kilograms down here. This is where we can flip our conversion factor. We still know 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. But in this case, it's going to cancel there. So instead of dividing by the 2.2, we're actually going to multiply in this case. So 175 times 2.2 equals 385. And make sure you label it with pounds in this case. You can see how labels are important because 385 what? Is it kilograms or pounds? If you label things, you can make a lot less mistakes typically. And that concludes our examples of how to convert pounds to kilograms and kilograms to pounds. Understand that when you're converting from pounds and ounces to kilograms or to grams, typically this is used in more of a pediatric or neonatal setting, you will need to do additional processes because pounds and ounces are not equal. There will be another video to explain that, and you can check that out if that's something you're interested in learning how to do.